Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
Now, from the audience perspective, are you struggling to build a resilient business strategy that stands strong against unexpected challenges? Our guest today, Kenneth Edmonds from 22 Century Management, is here to talk to us. Kenneth is the visionary founder of 22 Century Management, a firm dedicated to optimizing business operations with a commitment to underpromise, overdeliver. His career is marked by extraordinary experiences, including flying on the space shuttle, pilot training aircraft, and even chasing a train through Mexico. Kenneth combines deep industry insights with hands-on expertise to help organizations streamline processes, boost efficiency, and achieve sustainable growth. His passion for leadership, operational excellence is evident in every project he undertakes, making him a sought-after speaker and trusted advisor in the business community. Kenneth, it is good to have you here. Welcome, and how are you?
I am doing fine.
Do you have a favorite quote, saying, or tagline for your business?
I teach a management class, and this is a principle that I beat into my students during the class: to underpromise and overdeliver. Often people write checks they can't cash. So they'll make you a promise in business and say they'll do something in a certain time, and then they don't do it. If you want to have good customer relationships and a sustainable business, if you use the motto of underpromise and overdeliver, you're going to have very happy customers, and it's a foundation to being successful.
And here some people get pilot training. It's not every day. It's part of that stream. How does that come into play here? And does that also feed into your business nowadays?
I was working as an air traffic controller in El Paso, Texas, where the shuttle simulator aircraft was based. As a controller, we could get to go for rides on various things that operated out of the airport. So we got to fly a mission with a shuttle pilot that was training for his next mission. There's actually two pilots on board. There's one that acts as the Gulfstream pilot, and then there's the space shuttle pilot. We could watch the entire cockpit, got to watch the approaches. One of the things that was really interesting in this process was that they flew approaches to every potential landing field that they might use in an emergency. They had these sites around the world. The simulated sites were at White Sands, a huge testing range. They would fly a practice approach into each of them just to make sure that they were comfortable with the glide slope and all of the things they would need if they had to land in an emergency. That ties into what I do, is that, it shows the need to be planned for every contingency. But one of the things that I see from my training class for service managers, I would ask them their 5-year plan, and I got a deer in the headlights look. I asked what they would do if they walked up and their building had burned to the ground. What would they do? Again, deer in the headlights. And as a manager, it shouldn't be that way. They should know their plan. It goes back to the space shuttle. They have a plan for emergencies and the overall mission plan. The foundation missing in both circumstances is they don't have a business continuity plan, and they don't have a long-term operation plan. They don't really know what the mission is. They're just going day to day.
You mean to tell me the immediate response is buildings burnt down? Going fishing. We'll come back tomorrow. Get rid of the shock and awe.
A quick message. Got a mug in hand? Good, because freshly brewed coaching is best served with your favorite roast. Join Wayne Pratt and Matt Hawksley as they spill the beans on how everyday pros just like you can use real coaching tools to level up their careers, teams, and mindset. It's bold, it's real, it's freshly brewed. Grab your free shot of clarity at freshlybrewedcoaching.com.
I love the metaphor about bulletproof. Can you tell me what a bulletproof business strategy is?
Well, you want something to take care of you no matter what happens. I go back to the space shuttle training. No matter what happened, they were prepared. The world today is changing so rapidly that any business whose business plan is, we're going to sell more next year than we sold this year, they're not even beginning to be ready for the things that are going to happen when they change. Many years ago, the primary office equipment was a typewriter. And typewriter dealers sold typewriters, they maintained typewriters. And a lot of those dealers stopped existing as things changed. They missed things like Hewlett and Packard building printers in the garage. They missed a company called Wang that developed word processing software, IBM, and the PC. And so they thought their business models will just sell more typewriters and fix more typewriters, and life's good. But then typewriters were gone and they had no plan. The ones that did better at planning started taking care of printers and copiers to build a more enduring business. Some of those same businesses that were creative when they were younger have basically reverted to that we're going to sell more next year than this year. And they're not looking down the road. To train a service technician, it's 3 years from the day they walk in the door until they're 100% proficient. So the service manager hiring today is hiring for 3 years from now. If he doesn't know where 3 years from now is, how does he make a good hire?
It sounds like there are two event horizons. One status quo, which is life goes on, depending on what you're doing for a service. Then there's one called adverse events. In other words, a storm just rolled through or a fire, whatever the case might be, but things definitely not going to plan. The other one can be kind of adverse, but there's a change. And you mentioned with the typewriters and the evolution of the computer. When you're looking at a business, let's say I'm making mousetraps or widgets, I get the understanding of how to map out for a disaster. The place burns down, bad. In your case, it'd be flooding and hurricanes, but other places in North America, tornadoes or derechos, which was what we've had here up in Ottawa. Not to the severity that you got. But how do you map it for, this product is good for the next 10 years? Soap is soap. Toothpaste is toothpaste. You can add things, tweak it a bit, but it is what it is, and it's not going to shift unless there's a massive revolution. Versus tech, right? The smartphone evolution. It's migrated from the days of the BlackBerry to two main contenders. It's either something based on a fruit or something called an Android. How do you map out and make it bulletproof for that long-range plan, or make them get wise to it fast?
One of the key planning tools called the PEST analysis, it involves looking at the political, economic, technological, and sociological things that may change. For example, you're going to look out 5 years. You're not going to be perfectly clear, but you're going to have some ideas of things that might change, and you can start to figure out, well, if this changes in one direction or the other, how would I deal with it? A good example is political. 3 years ago, if you did a political analysis, you could look at the current environment, but you'd know there was an election coming, and so you had to think about, well, okay, if that election comes, what might change? Tariffs, taxation. You have to think about it. If this changes in a way that's negative for me, what are my options? Let's reduce it to a local level. You have a small sandwich shop in town, and the county's desperate for money and the city's desperate for money. So the cost of taxes is probably going to go up on your product, and maybe some additional taxes on your business. You have to factor that in. If taxes go up 10% or 20%, what does that do to my margins? What does that mean I have to do to my prices? What's that going to do to customer demand? We think through those things and count that as a factor into what's going on. The big employer in your town's a brick manufacturer, and you get a lot of customers from the brick shop. You hear rumors that the brick shop may not be long for the world. So you think about, well, what happens if that brick shop goes away? What's going to happen to my customer base? What can I do to protect myself? Think about adding delivery or other things. Worst case, plan for an exit strategy. Technology, what's going to change in the food preparation business that might make us more efficient? A good example is AI order taking. You can create an AI agent today that somebody could call in, place an order, and print the ticket there. You wouldn't have a person talk to the client. So it makes that more efficient, probably much more accurate. You start to think about these things. What's going to happen? And sociological tendencies, for example, maybe there's a greener way to do things. If the green's not the flavor of the month, you think about what's going to change. How's people's attitudes going to change? As the younger generation comes up in a corporation, the buyers coming into the marketplace now, Gen X and millennials. These new style buyers do things very differently than a baby boomer buyer did. Baby boomer wanted to get somebody in front of him, talk to them. These millennials and Gen X, they go on the internet. 60% of their buying decision is made prior to contacting a salesperson. So what you have to think about is, what are those changes going to impact? How do we need to modify our business to adapt as they come online? And you see, when you do all of those analysis, then you have a pretty good idea of what the range of the world will look like that you're going to be operating in. From there, it's okay. Now, how do we build a business plan that's flexible and adaptable? We build it out 5 years and then update it every year to map any changes. In business, here's one of the things that most people never think about. And this is a principle I love from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. Think about it from the perspective of, when I leave this store, what do I want to leave behind? Am I going to work in it till I die? Am I going to transition it to my family? If that is your plan, make sure the rest of the family is on board, because if they're not, you're in real trouble. Am I going to build this up and sell it, or build it up and franchise it? If you're not thinking way down the road, even your 5-year plan may not point you in the direction that you want to be. That's really the foundation point.
Interesting you mentioned using AI to take in information from the client. On Instagram, a guy drives up to the ordering for a fast food place without mentioning the name. And you could tell it was an AI voice, a bit mechanical, etc., which is fine. The guy says, "And what is your order?" says the female prompt. So I want 5,000 cups. 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. On comes a real person. "Can I help you?" So it told me 2 things. So the person didn't want to talk to a machine. He wanted to talk to a person, and it was the younger person. It was an interesting take. Sometimes the best laid plans of mice and men don't survive the first encounter with the enemy. When you have pushback, but it's like, "I like it. I want to do this." How do you train your businesses to realize, listen, I'm trying to do something, I'm trying to streamline it, with good intent, but it's kind of a rough road. It's not running as smooth as it could be, and you change something that maybe you shouldn't have, or you have to tweak it. How do you help them tune into that?
Well, one of the things I encourage is you make just changes in small steps. So for example, I'm working to create a 24-hour receptionist for nonprofits in my area to get practice. Think about it, what questions they'll ask. And the bottom line is, if it can't answer the question, it has the capability to send a message or an email to the right party. If it knows it needs to go to the sales team, or it needs to go to the operations people, you can create a workflow that does that. But you always have that fail-safe that it'll send a message to a real person, to follow up the next day. That's a small implementation. And if it runs after hours, it means that the person that's calling is going to get information they couldn't have gotten any other way. Yeah. If it works well and you don't get any pushback, she'll take your receptionist, reassign her other tasks. She only jumps in if she's needed. And if this AI knows that during certain hours there's a human available right there, it could say, "Let me transfer you," and then transfers it to her phone.
When we talk to business planners and coaches, there just seem to be analysis paralysis, where it's ready, aim, and then never fire. And the other are trying to run business while their house is on fire. How do you thread that needle?
That's a problem for a lot of businesses, because they get so busy working in the business that they don't buy time to work on the business. One of the reasons people engage with me is because I can work on their business and not disrupt their day-to-day activity too much. And then what happens is they get the business worked on, as they start to put systems in place. One of the things I teach in my service management course is that systems are your lifesaver. You build systems so people know what to do. You also learn to delegate. And this is a challenge for most entrepreneurs. They got to have their finger in everything. But in reality, if you train your management team to be independent, and then, know that they'll take care of, if it's a service issue, they'll take care of it. Sales issues, they'll take care of it. So it frees up time for the entrepreneur to work on strategy, planning. I teach my service managers that they need to teach their technicians to operate their territory like with their business. You teach them what they need to do, but you give them the responsibility and delegate the authority. And you do it kind of like a spring, where you let go. You start slowly giving them more authority in their territory. If they want to buy donuts for a good customer, bring them in every once in a while. They shouldn't have to beg for permission. Just do it. They should have that freedom to make wise decisions. Everybody's job gets easier. It is also the responsibility of every manager to train his replacement. So they have to have a number two that's in place. And there's selfish reasons to do that. The first selfish reason is that if you want to go on vacation and not answer the phone, you need to have somebody there that can take care of the shop while you're gone. And then secondly, you push things down on him, that frees up more time for you to pick up larger tasks. One of the stats that I found and I share in the class is that the managers that train their replacement are like 50% more probably going to get promoted. Because if you don't have a replacement, they're not going to promote you because they don't want to have somebody not knowing what's going on. Those principles answer your question.
We are on Zoom, and we have one host who is in Ottawa, another host who's in Kingston, Ontario, and a guest in Florida. One thing that came up was a sandwich shop. There's a move toward hyper-local, and everyone has their own language. How do we deal with the anti-international or anti-globalist? Where's that sweet spot between using the best of both toolboxes?
It depends on where your customers live. If you're in a small town in Ontario and most customers are local, focus on local. My messaging would change a little bit on the marketing side, that we use local ingredients, they're locally sourced, those kinds of things that would resonate with the audience that I cater to. If you live in a border town and cater to both sides, then you got to have a little more widespread, we buy some of our produce from Canada, we buy some from the US, so you got the best of both worlds. And again, it goes back to thinking, who is my customer? You look at it from the customer's perspective. How do I make this appealing to my range? If I was advertising in Canada, I might focus on the Canadian part of the products. And in the US, I'd focus on that side. But if I'm doing broadcast or on the internet, both aren't going to see it. It's got to be in the middle positioning.
So I'm going to go back to the best laid plans of mice and men. When stuff hits the fan, how do you get them to walk through a situation that's gone sideways?
Well, the first part of it is, as you build out the plan, you analyze the possibilities. One of the first tools is called a business impact analysis, which looks at the potential of what might happen. For example, it could be a fire, it could be a flood, it could be a storm of some kind, but it could also be cyber crime, either penetration and a data loss, or where they lock up your data, where you can't get to it. And all are things that you need to plan. So as you create a disaster plan, you start at the ones that are most likely and highest impact first, but you want to walk through down to where it's pretty unlikely and very low impact if it does happen, if your grass gets too tall. We can figure that out. But things, and I'll use an example. Go back to the industry I know well. A copier dealer or office equipment dealer, their building burns to the ground. It has their equipment, inventory, all their records, all of it's gone. Now, they're in a world of hurt if they don't have a backup offsite. That's one of their most urgent needs. The first thing to make it out in a checklist, and this is what you do, is for each one, you create a checklist that the person has downloaded to their phone. First thing is, we got to get our phone, make sure our phones get answered. That's the most important thing. What's our plan? What are the steps involved in transferring the phones? The next thing is we got to find a place to operate. We may delegate part of the team to work from home, go back to remote office. But some things may have to be centralized where people need to talk all the time. Maybe we rent a conference room in a hotel or a co-working space. We call up and say, we need that space, set up computers. Get the backup restored, assuming it's a cloud or offsite. Now, what hardware do we need to put that backup on? Checklists and spec sheets. We have all of this written out so we can take care of it. Now the next, make sure that we can start dispatching our technicians again, know their status, and hopefully everybody's okay. If they've got inventory and supplies in their trucks, they can service customers. We had customers that called in yesterday that are expecting service, and we have a 6-hour response time. So that gives you an idea how short that window is to get those steps done. If you're having to make it up as you go, you won't make it. Let's say we've got a little bit of stuff and the techs are working, they're okay for a while. Next, you get supplies and parts on their way. All of our main stuff is bought up, which means we need to have a list of things to order so we can get that order. We have to have a contact that if this happens on a Saturday morning, we can get a hold of that contact and they have the authority to get that stuff happening so that by Monday or Tuesday, we start having parts and supplies back in. We can't wait for the order to get processed on Monday, shipped on Tuesday, and arrive on Friday. 5 days without parts and supplies is going to make it very difficult to take care of our customers. If you can't take care of your customers, they're going to find somebody else. They're going to find somebody that can take care of them. And once they do, it becomes very hard to get them back. On Tuesday, we're going to have this big shipment of parts and supplies coming in. Well, we can't leave it on the truck. So what's our plan? Well, get some storage, like a used store, and put it in there. We're just going to pile it on the floor? No, that's not a good idea. So now we've got to have racks. We have to know which used store is best located for us. Where can we get racks and get them set up and installed quickly? If we know we've got stuff coming and go back in on Monday, use that the used store buildings, order the racks and have it in, and Tuesday we can install it. Then when the parts show up on Tuesday, we can put stuff up and we're organized back to a functional company for dealing with emergency operations. We're almost back to being functional. We've got to get started working on our plan for reconstruction and figure it out. Then it's get the building restarted. Maybe we bring some loaner equipment in or new equipment into our co-working space or a rented office, set up a mini sales office so the sales guys can come back to work and have something they could bring a customer in to show. I've thought through this 100 times. But if you hadn't thought about it and your building's gone, what are you going to do?
Fishing. But what's left at that point?
Something you touched on, I'm interested in. I remember fire drills in school, the eye rolling, alarms going off, everyone's got their clipboard, no sense of urgency, the pushback, I can't be bothered. How do you deal with creating that urgency without scaring people that they literally could be saving their corporate life?
You have the conversation with them and ask, okay, your building burned down. What are you going to do? That's where I would start. Your building's burned down. What are you going to do? What's your first step? Let's build a plan. We build out different scenarios, run those exercises so everybody practices like it's real. We don't do them every week. We don't do them every month, but it may be once a quarter. We pick one of the scenarios on a random basis so people aren't knowing what's coming next. So that's a big piece of it. Part of what needs to be included goes into crisis management because your disaster is a crisis. And so there's got to be communication strategies in there. For example, if the building burns, what do you tell the newspapers? What do you put on social media? How do you communicate with your customers, your other stakeholders? Templates need to be in place for all of those things so that you don't have to think of, okay, how do I want to say this? With a cyber intrusion or ransomware attack, the first call is to your cybersecurity company. If you don't have one, that's one of the things you do. I can help find somebody because they will tell you exactly what you could and should say and what you should not say. If you say the wrong words, you may take on liability. So it's going back to this is what we do. This is how we do it. The first call in that case is to the cybersecurity people. Say, here's what's going on. They'll also want you to preserve an instance of the system at that point so they can figure out how that person got in. Back to the drill and active shooter situation. What's your plan? And it's kind of like a fire drill, but it's more involved. Know where the shooter is and what can we do to keep him where he is? And then how do we get everybody we can evacuated safely? What brought that to mind? I was working as an usher at a big event. And we were responsible for if something happens. And an active shooter was one of those things. They said, here's a situation, code words, and evacuation plan. The company doesn't need to be that dramatic, but you still have to have a plan. Okay, if he's in the front office, is there a way we can lock him where he can't get out of the front office and people can evacuate out the back while we're waiting on the police? And you say, well, we're sacrificing the people in the front office better than sacrificing it could be there in the service department. Can we lock them off there? Sacrifice who's in the back? Because if we lock them where they are, it minimizes their ability to impact life and property. And again, I know that sounds cold. Hopefully the people in the front office, the drill, dive under desks, try to be inconspicuous, to play down. These are things to think about. Small buildings are not so bad, but what if you run a factory? Now what do you do? How do you deal with it? You got people through maybe 3 or 4 stories over 10,000 square feet. These are things I think about. I don't think inside or outside the box. I take the box off the table and I just think about all of the things that might happen and what do you do about them?
So Ken, using that premise now, you want the business to think the same way or start getting on the same vein. All right, regardless of whether it's a critical failure or adverse event, something shifted. You want them to be nimble. How do you get them into that cultural mindset? I trust my crew to do the right thing. They have a sense of the nature of the business. I know things to happen, whether it's buying donuts for a client, just, that makes the client happier and continues to fosters a good relationship. How do you get the owner headspace into this is a culture, this is how you do it? Because some people love to micromanage, some macromanage. There's a halfway mark, right? You have to have KPIs or a dashboard or something, but at the same time, you don't want to, hand on throat scenario. So how do you get that cultural mindset into someone's head?
The point is you have to help them see the value of it. Because the owner's not going to change unless he sees how it's going to make his life better and his company better. So it's sitting down with that person. Sometimes I'm not fit for a company. In fact, in most cases, it's more of I bring them in to talk to me to see if we're a fit. It's screening out the ones that aren't willing to change. If a company's not willing to change, there's no sense in me helping them. I might make some money, but I'm not in this business to get rich. I'm in this business to help businesses. Because for 30 years, I traveled around and saw other dealers and businesses. I saw a copier dealer in a market that was going to turn it over to his son. He had offers to buy his business back when it was healthy, and no, it's for my son. His son didn't want to be in that business. He wanted to run a pizza shop and chase skirts. One of the people that offered to buy him just set up a branch up there and took his customers. He lost out on the potential cash they would have paid him. And instead, he ran a business till it was run into the ground. You got to have them be willing to have the conversation. The biggest thing is their ability to grow, because most owners have a goal of growing their business. Well, if you want to grow your business, you got to have a management team. You got to trust your management team. And we got to build a culture that's going to encourage growth. We want to build a culture in a company where everybody is on the same page and everybody believes in the company. So, you have a lot of times you have these statements on the wall, principles, goals, whatever. But it has to be something that's really heartfelt that the whole team believes in. And that starts with the owner believing in it and living in it in his life and, in his life, at least in the company. And then, his managers adopting that, and so respecting employees, trusting employees, those kinds of things. If that's part of what you want to make your culture, you got to do that. It starts at the top. You can't do it from the bottom. So, I talk to service managers and I tell them that they need to do as much planning for their, given the parameters they have, as much planning as they can. But if they don't have guidance, they can only make their best guess. And again, it's explaining to the owner why it's so important all the way up and down the company that they know these things and they know what's going to happen. Every department should have a plan for growth. They should know what's our hiring parameter. When do we hire our next technician? When do we hire our next admin person? What's our AI strategy? What are the things that we can employ AI agents to do that will do it in a way that will make us more efficient and provide better customer service? And you build that into the planning.
If you're listening on audio, you won't know how much gray hair is in this podcast. But here's the question.
It's platinum, man. It's platinum. Don't call Greg, call Rich.
I'm the silver fox.
You mentioned typewriters. I was the last Canyon rep hired as an electronic typewriter. They didn't even think word processing, but man, was that electronic typewriter ever cutting edge for about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
A young senior, what tech is worth the pain because the choice is gone? What is worth the aggravation to learn?
The key skill right now I would learn is computer skills and AI. For that young person looking for a growth opportunity to have let's say a moderately broad background in both computers, I would say from the hardware perspective, from the software perspective, and mostly when I say software applications, unless you're into programming, learn how to use AI for yourself. I have 15 AI windows open on my computer. I'm using AI to create a text, which I feed to another AI that creates a video that's me talking in my voice, looks like me, looks like my voice, except it doesn't blink. And, and then I put it loaded into my application, my courseware. I have a couple of AI tools I've used, and I've had some people say this is AI generated, but nobody really cares. You see so much content now when you go to somebody's website that is AI, that they got an AI character talking to you. And it's because I can create 100 really good videos in a couple hours to make one good video. If I have to record it and edit it, I got to write the script, record it, and then go back, re-record it, edit it. And then those things just take so much time. And again, it's not about AI replacing people, but about AI expediting abilities. If you're a young person looking for a job, I would start to develop some AI skills. Because if you go into a company with, let's say you're going in as admin, and you've got all the basic admin stuff down and you have AI skills, and somebody else that just has the basic admin stuff, the AI person's going to get hired 90% of the time. I mean, actually, it's the whole spectrum of people. If you're job hunting, learn some AI. There's a lot of free courses, but I think that's a critical piece of the future for everybody.
Ken, if you're starting up a business and trying to get all the touch points, you won't get everything 100% of the time. Unless Lady Fortune smiles upon you. What are the top 3 things that a business should have in place when they're about to say we're here and start up?
The first thing is capital, because you're going to have some money to start any business. You need a business plan. And this is one of the things that catches people sometimes is they'll have a business plan they use for the bank. It's got all these pretty numbers and all this pretty stuff in it and rosy pipe dreams. But that's not the business plan you also need to have. That's how you're going to run your company. In other words, what are our, go back to this 5-year plan. If I have a 5-year plan, I can break it up into what's going to happen in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. Okay, break it down like year 1 stuff. We're getting ready to start. What do I have to do each quarter? My first quarter, what do I have to do every month? Break that down into 4 weeks. What are the tasks I have to do these 4 weeks? What are the most important things to get done? Goes back to another 7 habits, the big rocks. What are the big rocks that are going to make or break my business? Because it's easy to get involved in the trivial stuff to make the office look pretty, straighten the brochures. But that's not, you have both your business plan and disaster plan built out. Disaster can hit a small, brand new business as easy as it can hit somebody that's been around 100 years. It's probably a harder impact on the new business because they're not going to have some tools that, and some resources, this is a better word to say it. They're not going to have on a capital and credit standing that a bigger business would have.
This resonates with our clients. How big a geography do you feel comfortable in working in, and how do we get a hold of you?
Right now, my focus is basically on the U.S. and Canada because regulations are similar and there's no language barrier. My website is 22ndcenturymanagement.com, 22ndtymgmt.com, 22ndcenturymanagement.com, or ken@22ndcenturymanagement.com. Email is always the best way to get a hold of me. On my website, I have a phone number. You might get a voice agent because I might not be answering the phone right now. Those are the ways to get in hold of me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I try to be where I can communicate with people that might benefit from what I do.
Thank you to Ken Edmonds, my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. Hopefully you found this session informative, entertaining. And you know what? If you want to understand about space shuttle pilot training, Ken's your man. You want to know how to chase a train in Mexico? We never touched that story yet, but you know what? That's where you reach out to Ken and talk about the trains in Mexico. But more importantly, if you're starting a business, trying to get things together so that your business has a plan and you're growing it or looking to flip it at some point in time, Jen to reach out to.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREAVINH.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motivateyou.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter U.ca, or his website, motivateyou.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people: Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert, Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host, Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space, then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motivate-U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.